Welcome to the Millionaire Race podcast, where we are empowering you to better your financial standing in order to collectively solve many of the socio-economic problems that face the African American demographic today. My name is Toxio Ganyemi, your host for this podcast, and I'm really excited to have you on the show with us today. So today we get to hear the second and final part of the exciting interview we were having with Bobby in the last episode, and we're going to hear some more exciting things on what he's doing and how he's running the race and how he got to where he is. But before that, I wanted to talk to you briefly about debt. By now, we all know how to calculate our net worth, right? We've talked about that in the previous episodes, and we'll continue to talk about that in every single episode, because your net worth is the way to measure the progress that you're making on the Millionaire Race. We all know how to calculate our net worth. I was listening to a radio show the other day, and the hosts on the show did not know how to calculate their net worth. So you are way ahead of them right now, because we've talked about this in every episode and we'll continue to do so on how to calculate your net worth. You need to know what your net worth is, because that's how you measure your progress on the Millionaire Race. In measuring your net worth, remember, you take out your notepad, you add up everything you own. That includes, your assets, your house, your cars, your cash in the bank, everything that has your name attached to it. It's stuff that you own, right? You add up the value of all these things. And usually that gets us pretty excited when wow, I own this and that. Yeah, but then of course, you then subtract everything you owe. And that's where some of that excitement goes away. Yeah. All your debts that are attached to some of those things. Subtracting your debt shows you exactly what your net worth is. And according to the census.gov site, which I reference all the time, one of the reasons I use this site is just so that you and I have a central place where you can go to get the same data that I'm getting, and a place where I believe we can agree on the data that's being presented. But on the census.gov site, there is a table that shows the median value of assets for households based on the 2020/2021 census that was done. What they're referring to is simply the net worth of households, and it's broken down by race amongst other categories as well. But the racial demographic one is the one we're interested in at this point in time. The white or Caucasian household has a net worth of $217,500. The Asian household is slightly higher at $264,000. The Hispanic household has a net worth of $40,000. And the Black household has a average net worth of $18,000. Really low. Really, really low. And I can understand why it's that low. Because think about it. If you go back again to all the stats we gave in episode 1, 12% of the population, which is the makeup of the African American demographic, actually control between 2, maybe 3% of the wealth of this nation. Now, obviously, 12% of the population cannot survive on just 2 to 3% of the wealth of the nation. Their standard of living, or our standard of living, is obviously subsidized through debt. And debt is a brutal taskmaster. It's like running the Millionaire Race with 50-pound weights shackled to your feet. For some of us, the weight's so large, we can't seem to move forward. So I totally understand, because debt really sucks the life out of all the progress that you're making. We've learned to calculate our net worth, and you figured out exactly how much debt you have. Our goal going forward from this day, it needs to be to stop adding to that amount of debt and reducing the debt. How do you do that? Well, after calculating your net worth, if you recall, the next step that we talked about is putting together a budget. The best that you can come up with. Well, for some folks, like I said before, it's a very simple one or more complex. Now, with couples, there's usually one person who is better at doing a budget than the other. Let the person who's stronger at it, do it. even if you're both not that strong at it, one of you is less weak. Let's put it that way. Whoever is better at doing the budget, let that person handle it and put it together and come and sit down and go through. So you know exactly where your funds are going. You know, you get a great visual of your daily outgoings. And in order to stop going further into debt, you have to spend less than what you bring in. That's the only way. So you can either increase what you're bringing in, which we will with time when we talk about education and excellence and doing other jobs and things like that. We'll talk about that. But in the meantime, with whatever you're bringing in right now, a budget helps you adjust your spending so that it comes below the income. You have to. That's the way you stop going further into debt. So yes, does that mean you're going to cut out some things and make some sacrifices? Yes. You might have to make some tough decisions. That's okay. Because these sacrifices they're typically temporary, just until you get right side up. While you're doing this, you'll be working towards other ways of increasing your income, which will help in getting rid of your debt as well, and perhaps bring back some of the things that you cut out in the first place. But right now, if you have a lot of debt and you're not sure how to handle it, you need to take a financial course. All right. We talked about that as well. You need to understand how to handle finances. There's no shame in it. Take out the pride and whatever. Take a financial course. If you're married, certainly take it with your spouse. You need to take it together. And these courses are held in many places, especially at good churches. It's offered at our church and at many other churches, around. Offer these to help the congregation, but they'll also help anybody who walks in through the doors. So ask at a church if there's one that you go to, or if there isn't, go to, call around any churches around you. There are churches everywhere. And most of them offer these services. They're not expensive. Some are free. Some, you pay $50, $100, whatever it is that they're offering. It's going to save you thousands and thousands of dollars and help you on this millionaire race. There are different types of debt, but we don't have enough time to go into all of them. So we'll probably touch base on some of these on the next podcast. We're actually putting together some resources for you that explain further and go into more detail on all these topics that we talk about. There's just not enough time on the podcast to be able to share everything. So we'll get those resources ready. And once they are, we'll let you know where you can request them from or order them from. And now, when we get back, it's time to hear the conclusion of our interview with Bobby. We've talked about the Millionaire Race, right? And how the numbers show the current situation in the country and how we're trying to change it. Because the hope is that if more people have the more financial stability and ability actually to be able to put their dreams into fruition, we'd have more people in positions of good decision making positions like you talked about.
Sure.
And that's the idea. I mean, what do you think about that, about the premise?
Yeah, man. Toxie, I'll tell you, when you shared that first podcast, I was a little apprehensive on the idea of what but listening to it, I think you're really onto something here. And, is it realistic that everybody will be a millionaire? No. I'll say that from my perspective, no. But can anyone listening be a millionaire? I can tell you emphatically yes. Emphatically yes, because there's nothing in my background that would suggest that I should be. And I didn't even know I was running a race until you told it, until you called it that. And if I can, I would love to go into a little bit of how I got there.
Please.
But I just from, the premise of a millionaire race, I think it's something that anybody, if I could do it and I wasn't even trying to do it, then I know for a fact anyone to do it, because I didn't have any business training, yet I was able to be in business. I didn't have any really high level of education, any specialized level of education. Yes, I went to an engineering school, but I barely passed out of it, and I didn't even complete it. And I was working, in a warehouse, running a forklift and filling orders and then moving boxes at UPS, right? So I was at an entry skill level position. But here's what really changed everything for me. And I wouldn't say changed as in the past tense. I would say this made all the difference for me, is that I never wanted to be in debt for some reason. I never wanted to be in debt. And the only thing I could point to in my past to say that, because my parents, bless their hearts, they couldn't handle money well. My father to his death didn't handle money well at all. Filed bankruptcy more than once. Died with debt. My mother, bless her heart, she just didn't have the right mindset about debt and managing money. So for me, I never wanted to be in debt. I looked back I saw a Volkswagen Rabbit back when I was in high school. I never forget that it was a convertible Volkswagen Rabbit. And on the license plate, they had a vanity plate, and it had the number I, the O, N-O, and the number 1. And I said, I owe no one. I love it. That's how I want to be when I grow up. I don't want to owe anybody, And so that kind of just started my journey. And so not wanting to be in debt was the basis for how I began to handle money, how I thought about money. I was never, ever a high earning person, even up to the last, I'm trying to think of when my wife stopped working in corporate America in 2012. She got laid off in 2012. Life changed for her. And even then, when we had a combined income, our combined household income was was right at $100,000. I think, no, actually less. She was probably making 50 at the time. I was self-employed and I was probably making like 40 something, so we were around in the 90s. And this was in 2012. So this wasn't like, back in the 80s. And she got laid off. She lost that job. And even then, I kept my personal income very modest, but because we didn't live carrying a lot of debt, when she got laid off, it didn't rock our world. And that's what opened up the opportunities for the lifestyle that we live now. But it was always on the front of my mind. And even in college, it's funny, I'm in the apartment industry and I never in my life lived in an apartment. When I was in college, for some reason, I started my sisters, I have 2 older sisters, they moved into their first apartment and I thought it was so cool, but then I didn't think rent was cool. So I was like, man, I'm not going to rent an apartment. When I get out of college and get a job, I'm going to, buy a house. So I started looking at houses. And back then, we didn't have the internet, but they had the free books you can get at the grocery stores and the convenience stores where they have pictures. See, you're looking at me like, what is this? Yeah. Back in the day, the real estate books were books, like, I forget what they were called, but they would have pictures of a house and a little, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, a little description of the house and the price and the location or city that it's in. And so you could go in any, grocery store, any convenience store, and they were free. At the front of the store, be racks of maybe 5 of them. Okay. And so, they were free. I can afford that. So, but that's how I started researching real estate and understanding what a house costs. And I was at our school library, and a girl walked by, a friend of mine, and she goes, "Bobby, what you doing? What are you looking at? Houses?" And she started laughing, like, and walked off. But in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I'm not renting an apartment. I'm going to buy a house when I get. So I understood what at least a house could cost at that juncture in my life. So again, I didn't graduate. So I went back home because I was like, I'm not going to rent an apartment. And so I moved back home, and I told my mom, listen, I'm going to be here for like 6 to 9 months. But I was working full time at the warehouse. I was working part time with UPS. And I told my mother, I said, I'm going to save up because I want to buy a house. I'm going to save up for a down payment of the house. That's what I did. So was out of school June, I guess, at the end of that year, went through the summer. October, on my 22nd birthday, I put a down payment on a house and bought my first house. Yeah. And that began, the accumulation of assets and wealth. And again, I was making maybe $7 an hour, maybe $8 an hour. But because I understood that I didn't want a debt, so I didn't have a lot of credit, but the way I built my credit or started building my credit, again, I got some bad advice, but they were like, well, you can buy a TV at one of these rent-to-own places to begin your credit. And I was like, okay, so I got a little TV from a rent-to-own place thinking I was building my credit. Yeah, I paid it and paid for it, paid it off. But, I was trying and I understood that that's way, but fortunately, because of first-time home buyer programs, I didn't need a lot of credit. I just didn't. It was to my advantage. I didn't have bad credit and I didn't have negative things on a credit history. Yeah. So I was a fairly safe credit. Well, I probably wouldn't even be a safe credit because they didn't know will this guy pay his bills or not. But I knew that I would, I was going to pay my debts because I didn't like credit. So that started that kind of journey of assets. And of course, when I bought a car, I wouldn't finance it. Even if I got a 5-year loan, I had a 3-year plan. And so I just divided that thing by 3 years, 36 months. And that's what I paid regardless of my loan. And so after 3 years, I owned it outright and it still was worth something. It had some value. And and by the grace of God, these things would last instead of 3 years. That car lasts 10 years, And so I would be able to have not have a car note for 7 years easily, and have some money in the bank. And that was kind of my thinking.
Yeah. I mean, you've shared some amazing things here. I mean, throughout your conversation or our conversation, you've talked about excellence. It's come out in everything that you've said, where you were talking about, even the new generation. And as an African American, that you have to do things twice as well. Really, what you're talking about is just being excellent.
Yes, yeah.
And you've shown that, and the rewards of that they're obvious with you now. And then you've shared something important about debt, which is when you look at all those numbers, the African American household has a net worth. The average household has a net worth of just $24,000. That's with a house. Without a house, it's $8,000.
Yeah, wow.
Which is literally nothing. But when you look at the debt side, we have the same or more amount of car loan debt as the people with net worths of 100,000 or more. And so again, where you just shared that here with your car, minimizing that debt on that end is really powerful. And I'm sure people are learning from that as we speak. But I want to ask you this because you were going to mention how you on the race and how you got to where you are.
Yeah.
But most importantly, how has your faith played a role in this race?
Faith, and I don't really talk much about faith. I more talk about a relationship with God, right? Because I think there's a lot of people who may believe in God, and that's a good first step. But for my standpoint, God wants to have a relationship with us. And if you're a person that believes that there is a creator who created the universe and you're part of that creation, then if you believe there's a creator, then obviously that creator created you for a reason. And understanding that, it's only logical to go back then and say, well, if I'm created for a reason, I need to know what that reason is. And that is really what purpose is. You're like, I know why I'm here. I'm not questioning, am I a mistake or should I be here? I know why I'm here. The creator made me for a reason. And for me in particular, I learned that mine was part of my purpose was to, in particular, help young men. Now, I'm blessed to be able to help men and women, but my focus never was about men and women. My focus was never about youth. My focus was always about young men. And so I began to make decisions based off of that purpose. Like, can I help young men in doing this? Will this help a young man if I did this? And so the business that I'm in, the way we run the business, the way it's constructed in the operations, it's all with that in mind. Can this help? Now, that obviously opened up a lot of other opportunities. But when you go back to that purpose and having that purpose, that will guide your decision making. If you believe that God created you for a reason, and now you're operating in what the creator actually made you for, then it's going to dictate how your life path goes. Right.
So let's go a little deeper on that, because that's really important. I'm sure everybody hearing that will acknowledge that, yes, I need to know what my purpose is. But a lot of people will ask, how can I find that purpose? How can I know that that's the purpose? I mean, I like doing this, I like doing that. How do I know what my purpose is?
That's a good question. I would always advise people, it's not just about what you like or do. It goes back to what I said about going into business, having something bigger than yourself. Is your purpose bigger than you and your household and your family? Not just the good things, that everybody like, oh, you're doing this because you want your kids to be there, or you want your spouse to be. No. Is it bigger than? In other words, is there a God connection to your purpose? Because then that's God's purpose. When it becomes, about people that you've never met before or you don't know, and you're doing this thing that affects your household, but you're doing it because it's because of someone you've never laid eyes on, then I think that's the beginning of, that's a purpose there. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. That's awesome. So what are you doing right now? You were going to tell us how your journey, how you ran the race, and then what you're doing right now.
Well, there's several things going on right now, but I think the most prominent thing is that my wife and I, we've been doing, for the last, I think 8 years, we've been doing mission work in Jamaica. And back when she got laid off, she was just kind of in prayer. And God said, don't let your next 10 years look like your last 10 years. And she was like, well, God, now, and I'm going to frame this a little bit for you, for the listeners. At that time, we had a beach house. Now, you've heard a little bit about my story. I don't come from beach house lifestyle, right? But we had a beach house, and she was down there at the beach house. So she's now, and when we closed on the beach house in 2012, I lost my father the week that we closed. And so we never picked up the keys to the house because I was dealing with the funeral and his passing. And so we then went and picked up. So fast forward a few weeks, we're like furnishing the beach house, got it furnished, sitting down and taking a deep breath, and she gets laid off.
Ooh.
And we kind of laugh because it was such a journey to buy that property down there. It was in Florida. So at any rate, fast forward, she's sitting there having some time with God, and God tells her that. And she's like, well, God, my last 10 years ain't been too bad. Hadn't been a bad 10 years, and yet she delved into that a little deeper. And God said, I want you to do a mission trip. And we were never, both of us had never been on a mission trip, let alone organize one, never been on one, never even considered. It was always, and to be perfectly transparent, my wife had some health issues that we thought would prevent her from ever being able to do something like that, So we was like, God, that's not kind of our thing. And so God's like, no, this is what I want you to do. He was speaking to her specifically. And so she came, shared it with me, and she began that journey, changed our life forever. And so to go back to your original question, what are we doing now? Now we are in Jamaica. We're building a mission base, which is a villa that God actually said to us maybe 5 years into our mission work. He said, I'm going to give you Mission Villa, and when you see it, you'll know that it is. So we started believing that that was something on the horizon. We didn't know how we would get there. Well, part of us getting there was selling that beach house, selling a lake house, and getting into debt. We actually had to take out a mortgage on our primary home here in Georgia. But when you brought up this topic of the millionaire race and you were talking about net worth, I've for the last decade plus, I've just been kind of walking this journey with God. I wasn't concerned about my net worth at all. I knew there was some good, sound financial principles I needed to abide by and be a good steward over what God has given me, but I didn't care about my net worth. But when you brought it up and I listened to your podcast, I was like, I wonder where I'm at in this scenario. I was really, really pleased to say that I'm still in the millionaire race, and I've still, even though we took out some debt, we're still there. We're $1 million plus in net worth. And, but it goes back to where I started with not wanting to be in debt, having a lifestyle of not being in debt. And that created these opportunities to buy these assets and use them for what God is calling us to do now. And so even this house, in Jamaica, as is, it's conservatively a $1 million asset.
Wow.
Conservatively.
Wow.
And we don't have near that much debt on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
I mean, you are just a prime example of what the Millionaire Race is all about. It's not about flashy cars. It's not about just spending money anyhow. It's being able to accomplish all the things that you and your family need to accomplish. And most importantly, to be a vessel which you can be used to for the greater good, which you are obviously doing. And you've been doing that here for years. And now you've expanded to Jamaica and most likely other places as well, wherever God leads you to. So this is exactly what it's about. And I, on behalf of everyone, we commend you. I know you probably don't need our commendation, but you are an inspiration. Definitely. You've been one to me. And now that other people have gotten to know you, you're definitely an inspiration to them. Yeah, so as we conclude this, what would do you have any final words that you'd like to just share with other folks who are still at the beginning phases of running their race, or in the middle phases, or don't even know where to start? Do you have any words for them? Sure.
Well, first off, if you're at the beginning and you don't know where to start, you didn't listen to Toxie's podcast. So start listening to all the podcasts, because you did a great job of explaining. And listen, I'm sitting here talking to you all, And I've lived it. I'm almost 60, not quite 60 yet. And believe it or not, young people, when you get my age, you're still going to want to live some more. Yeah. I know when I was 30 and 20 something, I thought 60 was you done, life is over, but really and there's a lot of living in between. Mm-hmm. And so having these sound financial principles and purposes early on gives you a better life experience. And so that's, what I really want to encourage people, especially young people, but even older people as well, is that this only helps you first. But when you get beyond helping you and yours, it makes for a happy life. Mm-hmm. In a life of joy and purpose. And here's, I'm a logical thinker, Toxie. I just think straight logic. And if money was the answer, you would never have rich people commit suicide. So if you're just a logical thinker, you have to then understand that money isn't the answer. Mm-hmm. It's never been the answer. It never will be the answer. Money is not the answer. But what is the answer is having purpose. Mm-hmm. And that's at every stage of life. Mm-hmm. You need to have purpose when you are a teenager. Mm-hmm. You need to have a purpose when you're in your early 20s and so forth. And you need to have a purpose even when you're in your 80s. Mm-hmm. Because if God is still giving you breath, you need to have a reason to get up every morning that makes it a joy and makes it fulfilling to actually get up every morning, or else you're going to, last thing you want to do is not have any debt, have a beautiful home and have a really nice car and be miserable. Mm. Yeah. That's, and that's what I hear you are really addressing when you talk about this millionaire race, is that yes, it's going to open up a lot of other opportunities. It's going to address a lot of social ills. It's going to address social ills within your own family. It's going to address social ills within your neighborhood, your community, and hopefully the world around you. Yes. as God continues to move you forward. So I'm as passionate about my position in this, because if I can be here, then anybody can, and so much more. Like, imagine if I had like the talents of some of the people that and I wasn't a great drummer, obviously, right? But but God used that in my journey. Yeah. And so, if regardless of what gifting you feel like you may or may not have, operating in excellence, being excellent in whatever you're doing. And that, I just want to share this because I want to give my parents props in this point, is that's one of the things they really drilled into me. If I was to cut the grass, they would point out the errors and make me correct it, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't like it at the time, but they kept saying, if you're going to do something, do it well. That's what they always say. If you're going to do something, if you're going to clean the bathtub, clean it well. And so when I started parking cars, I was like, well, how can I do this well? That's what opened up the opportunity. When I started washing cars, how can I do it well? I was running a small business. How can I do it well? I'm going to do it. Let me do it well. So I'm going to pay people on time. I'm not going to, be strapped with cash because I spent all the money from last week's earnings and now I don't have the money for supplies or whatever. No, I'm going to do it all well. And with that mindset, I share that with your audience. No matter what you do, you can landscape, you can do whatever, and you can win this race doing it. So do whatever you do and do it well.
Oh, awesome. Bobby, thank you so much. We are out of time, unfortunately.
We're probably over time, right?
But would love to get you back on the show sometime in the future.
Well, thank you. I can say it's been my honor and really, really a pleasure. And I hope I provided some value.
You did indeed. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Bobby. And on behalf of everyone, thank you.
You're welcome, bro. Thank you.
That marks the conclusion of our interview with Bobby. The word that comes to mind amongst all the fascinating things that he talked about is the word excellence. It was a theme in everything that he did and does. As you run your millionaire race, let the word excellence be part of everything that you do in your current position and in future positions to come. My name is Toxio Gunyemi. God bless you and see you next time.